This Mini Countryman S All-4 weighs nearly 3,800 pounds. By conventional logic, it should drive like a delivery van. But thanks to a specific combination of adaptive dampers and assisted steering, the chassis team has successfully masked the mass. We're finding out exactly how they made a vehicle this large feel so maneuverable. The horsepower is adequate, but it's how it's tuned that hides this Mini's weight. 241 horsepower and 3,800 pounds is not a power-to-weight ratio that suggests any kind of urgency. In fact, that kind of ratio sits somewhere between a loaded Tiguan and a base model Forester, neither of which have been accused of making anyone late for anything. The 2-liter turbo disguises the mass just like the rest of this Mini by not overpowering it, but by arriving early enough that you stop thinking about the number. The engine note is present but unambitious, and the 2-liter turbo is doing its job without auditioning for a larger role. Mini offers something called driving sounds, and it's a synthesized audio environment to make the drivetrain seem more dramatic. And the cynics will say it's like having a laugh track for a joke that didn't quite land. I think most people may want to turn it off. The 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox is the unsung hero, doing most of the work masking this Mini's weight. Because dual-clutch gearboxes live and die by the way they're calibrated. Too eager and the car will lunge at parking speeds, too lazy and the turbo lag compounds into outright hesitation. Mini calibrated this one correctly, and because it's calibrated beyond just the throttle, downshifts arrive even before you need them. Upshifts arrive without announcing themselves, and the gear ratios are so well chosen, this engine is always in the meaty part of the rev range. The dual clutch will hold gears through corners without being asked, and on top of that, will downshift for you because it's anticipating you're entering a corner by how aggressively you get on the brake pedal. It's a very clever system, makes this much more enjoyable to drive, especially since it doesn't have shift paddles. The all-wheel drive system distributes torque between the axles electronically, and normally it behaves like a front-wheel drive-based crossover before it needs to send power to the rear axle. It's not the technical explanation of the system that matters, because all front-wheel drive-based crossovers do exactly the same thing, but it's the speed at which that torque gets distributed to the rear axle. Mid-corner, and even on these terrible road surfaces in the Toronto area at the end of winter, torque transfer happens seamlessly and doesn't upset the balance of the Countryman in any way. The system is nearly invisible, and it's one of this Mini set of tricks that happen before you consciously notice them. They haven't perfectly ironed out torque steer at low speeds and more aggressive throttle inputs. You're going to feel a little bit of tug at the steering wheel, but that goes away very quickly. Yes, that's go-kart mode, and it changes the throttle calibration to something a little bit more aggressive and also pumps some additional synthetic engine noise into the cabin. It may be the equivalent of putting a spoiler on a minivan, but the minivan's not charging you for a toggle switch. I know a lot of people hate these stop-start systems, but this one is virtually seamless and it doesn't irritate me in the least. Subscribers get notified when new episodes drop on this channel. Everyone else leaves it to the algorithm. And if you want to control when you see our episodes on YouTube, well, that's what the subscribe button does. I'm legally required to tell you that this segment is sponsored by GoClean. I'm ethically required to tell you that I use their waterless car wash. Here's the reality of filming cars. They don't have to be perfectly clean, but they have to be clean enough to survive a close-up. I call that video clean. For that job, this waterless car wash is ideal. A few sprays, quick wipe, and the car goes from someone drove it here to camera ready in minutes. I'm not going to oversell it. I use it, I like it, and it's in my kit now. That's Video Clean. Use code MAX15 for 15% off. A lot of crossovers in this segment have a dead zone in their brake pedal travel wide enough to park in. This Countryman S doesn't. Initial pedal application immediately translates into bite, and modulation through brake pedal travel is perfect. I've got precise control over this Countryman with that brake pedal, whether it's on corner entry or in an emergency stop. And surprisingly, ABS intervention is fairly late, and this thing stops on that proverbial dime. What that tells me is the team responsible for calibrating this brake pedal understand that slowing a vehicle and turning it are not sequential activities. That team deserves a raise, but if not, how about just an office with a window? This is where the trick of this Mini becomes explainable. Steering precision and feedback are not the same measurement. This Countryman S has limited feedback coming from those two front contact patches. The steering's well weighted, it is very precise, but that weighting is just a little bit synthetic. However, none of that matters because the nose goes exactly where you point it with precision, and there's enough feedback from this chassis that I do know what's going on at all four contact patches. Plus, the rack is quick just the way I like it, and this thing is incredibly maneuverable. It will pull off U-turns that will embarrass your favorite subcompact. The optional adaptive dampers are the centerpiece in the weight masking argument of this Mini. They're the frequency selective type, and the result is a chassis that eliminates any kind of secondary body motions almost entirely. Hit a mid-corner bump and the suspension just absorbs it in one single vertical movement. There's no wallow, no float, no secondary bounce. And with about 3,800 pounds of mass, this is not trivial engineering. As a dynamic package, the steering distracts you with its precision, and the dampers quietly remove any evidence you hit a meaningful road imperfection. That's the thing, these dampers absorb everything, including these nasty early spring potholes, without any kind of thud transmitting its way into the cabin. And sure, if you had the 18-inch wheels with the taller sidewall, there would be a little bit more compliance, but even with these 20s and their shorter sidewalls, the dampers do such a great job that it justifies their price. Body roll exists because physics demands it of 3,800 pounds, but as soon as you get into the corner, this Countryman takes a set, and there's never a moment mid-corner where the body is trying to decide which angle to hold. Mini's go-kart marketing language has survived 3 generations of dimensional growth. I can't quite say that this Countryman feels exactly like a go-kart, but what it does feel like is a very well sorted with unusually quick reflexes. And for most buyers, that's a useful thing to be, but it's maybe a little less useful to put in a brochure. If you want to support the channel beyond just watching, well, the merch store is open and the link is here. Your support there means more time for us to produce episodes like this and less reliance on industry access. No pressure, just an option. Seating position starts with a height that's probably the tallest of all Minis in history, but the good thing is visibility. There's a low cowl height, and this tall, almost vertical windscreen gives you incredible forward visibility. Sure, the A-pillars are thick, but the way they're positioned makes them manageable. But what really does work is the relationship between the seat, the steering wheel, and the pedals. I think what makes it is the amount of adjustment that's available in this steering column, so just about anybody can get a comfortable seating position here. I have a wonderful interface to this Mini. Plus, these seats are exceptionally comfortable and properly supportive in the corners. I don't complain about seats too often, but I do give these seats high marks. The only thing they're missing is the adjustable thigh support that we used to get on previous generation Minis. This toggle switch panel here serves all of your needs for getting this Mini moving. After that, everything is here in the screen. When you're using the system natively, not with CarPlay or Android Auto, all of the information is sort of organized radially around the screen. Then when you do use Apple CarPlay, like I do, it's a square box in the middle of a round screen. I'm sure there's a joke in here about square peg in a round hole. The system itself is responsive, which means there's a strong processor sitting behind all of this. And yes, there's some key driving information that's displayed in the center screen when I'd really prefer it here, which means I'm leaning on the heads-up display display for speed and other basic driving information when we're on the go. Yes, there's this textile portion of the dash and it runs across the top of the door panels, and it's two-tone here. It's actually stunning, very contemporary, and I think it's Mini's way of saying we got rid of hard plastics, and it did. Plus, the Veskin upholstery is so convincing that you stop thinking about it after the first 30 seconds. Now, keep in mind, hard plastics do exist, but they're very well hidden. You'll find those hard plastics in the lower dashboard, the lower door cards, and they're finished at a level where the upper dashboard and the upper part of the door cards are not. Cargo volume is massive, even with the second row seats up. Lots of storage underneath the hatch. And when you fold the second row seats down, cargo volume is enormous. Apparently it's 25% bigger than the previous Countryman. There's a panoramic glass sunroof, that's standard, and this front section tilts and opens, but the rear does not. Mini calls the whole assembly a panoramic glass sunroof, which is technically accurate in the same way calling a duplex a house is technically accurate. I have to mention, rear seat headroom is generous enough for those who are up to 6 feet tall, which was not true about the previous Countryman. The growth in all of the Countryman's dimensions bought something, and this is one of the things that it bought. If this episode gave you more information than a brochure or a press release, well, hit like. That means YouTube will share it with more people like you interested in an episode like this. Takes just a second. That's what the Mini told me after a week behind the wheel. We spent some time in the places where Countryman U25 owners actually talk about it. Not the press releases, not the press launches, not the configurator comment sections, but the forums and subreddits where owners compare notes after months of daily use. And the pattern is comically consistent. The mechanical car is a success story. The digital car is a customer service thread. Everybody agrees the chassis is good. Then the screen goes dark and suddenly the entire ownership experience turns into being unpaid beta testing. OS 9 suffers from screen blackouts frequent enough that owners have circulated an undocumented hard reboot procedure. Hold the volume knob for 70 seconds until the heads-up display retracts into the dashboard. Press reviews complain that the climate controls are buried in the screen, and I'm guilty of that too. Owners report something different. The automatic climate system itself has a fan speed logic defect. The gap between the lowest and next lowest fan settings jumps from a trickle to a blast, with no gradual transition. Owners coming from previous Minis are discovering features missing at delivery. Home Link is gone entirely, not optional, not available, gone. Paddle shifters are not standard on the S trim. For 2026, they require the JCW style package with iconic trim. And USB data ports were quietly removed from July 2024 production onward. Now, this hasn't been a problem for me, but some owners complain about the seatback design with the integrated headrest that's there to meet whiplash regulations. For some, it pushes their heads forward, and this is body shape dependent. Some owners find the seat comfortable, others describe long drive fatigue that didn't exist in the previous generation. Combined with the elimination of the adjustable under-thigh extension from the old sports seats, the seating regression is the most common ergonomic complaint. And then there's the comfort and spec problem, and owner advice gets unusually specific. Across every forum, the consensus advice to prospective buyers is the same. Spec the 18-inch wheels, not the 20s. Ride quality transforms. Budget for a garage door opener replacement since HomeLink is gone, and accept the software will improve over time because the car underneath it is worth the patience. And the consensus is that owners say it is. If you own one of these or have some quality seat time behind the wheel of one of these, let me know in the comments what I got right and what I got wrong, because real-world owner experiences are much more valuable than anything I can learn in a week-long press loan, and I always read those comments. This latest Countryman S All-4 isn't what Mini brand purists want it to be, and that argument was settled 2 generations ago. What it is a compact crossover engineered with unusual care to feel tidier, lighter, and more precise than its curb weight suggests. The Dynamics engineers solved a physics problem the product planners created, and then solved it well enough that the drive experience feels more convincing than the numbers on paper. What this is, my friends, is a complete reinterpretation of the Mini ethos. If you need all-wheel drive, urban agility that survives contact with actual urban roads, and a vehicle that can absorb bad roads without transmitting them into the cabin, the adaptive suspension belongs on your short list. This Canadian tester stickers at about $54,000, and the nearest US equivalent lands between $42,000 and $44,000, depending on how Mini USA structures its package bundling. And the car itself is more sorted than the website selling it. Mini's brand identity crisis is not the Countryman's to solve. The Countryman's problem to solve was to drive well despite its dimensions. And on solving that problem, it delivers. The target buyer is someone who's already accepted that Mini builds crossovers and is asking the only question that matters: does this drive well? And it does. The previous generation Countryman was a crossover that you tolerated for its practicality. This one is a Countryman you might actually choose for its dynamics. That's the Countryman S All 4. Subscribe if you want to see more of these. Don't if you don't. Comments are open if you disagree. And the merch store is here if you want to help support more of these. See you on the next one.